recently purchased this cheap $50 Chinese quad, and it got me thinking, what would make this thing even scarier to ride? And that would be this. A bigger engine for double the horsepower. Why the heck would I want to make a little Chinese quad even scarier and faster? And that's because I am a lunatic, obviously. So this was the cheapest engine I could find that would make this quad even faster. Some Chinese newspaper. If any of you guys can read that, let me know the headline of what's going on in China. There she is. And obviously, since I'm not an absolute lunatic, and that's because I am a lunatic, I'm going to be replacing the oil and the spark plugs with good stuff, because for how much I paid for this, I can almost guarantee that the oil inside of this transmission is not good. Disassembling it this time was certainly a lot faster than the first time. The gas tank is clearly leaking like a lot, so I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on with that. Before I go ahead and swap the engine over, I'm going to give this a coat of some JB weld. It obviously looks like somebody already did and it didn't work, so I'm gonna go ahead and double JB weld it and hope that it doesn't leak anymore. Looks like there's some cracking right in the center, so I just don't think they went quite thick enough with it. This looks like it's got a 1 hour cure time, so we should be good to go. Once I get the engine swapped over, I should be able to immediately fill it up with fuel. It's so funny how fast these little quads come apart. Like, I am probably 30 minutes into this at most, and it's about to come out. There we go, there's one little 90cc motor out of the quad. So it does look like this is actually just an exact replacement, basically, because everything lines up the same. The starter is on the top on this bigger motor, and the starter's on the bottom on that one, but everything looks pretty much identical between the two. Oh, let's fall and drop the motor while we're putting it in. Look at that. Holds up in the same spot. I don't even have to make any custom mounts for this. I did notice it has this extra wire terminal here that engine doesn't have. It looks like it would plug into this little CDI box here, but I think I can run it without this one plugged in, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to test with Spark, but this wiring loom harness looks like it traces all the way in these wires and then somehow comes back to the CDI. So they might just include this as an extra if you have a more modern quad, I think. I did end up robbing the old front sprocket off of the old motor just because this sprocket's actually a different size chain. I'm sure that this is a lot stronger of a sprocket than this one, but I think it'll be okay for now. So I've got both of these carburetors here now, and it's starting to look like they're actually identical. So we got millimeters here. This one is 16.89 millimeters. Let's go check the one on the pipe. So it looks like this one's a millimeter bigger. So that's funny. This is way bigger of an opening than this one. I want to try to use this one if I can, because that's gonna choke down air a lot. So this small one looks like the opening is 19.5 millimeters. This bigger one is 21 millimeters basically. So this is where the real difference comes in, is this is 19 millimeters around and this one is 22 millimeters around. So that's actually the difference, but it makes no difference if this is like 16. About this bag of jets, and it's got main jets and pilot jets in it, but these are all way too big to actually fit in there. I think that this is smaller than a 100, which is not very good because the average recommendation for 125 is bigger than a 100. Because a 100 jet should be 1 millimeter, I should be able to slide this in and out of the carburetor for that main jet, and if not, then I know it's not the right size. I've got all my drill bits here, and these go down to actually 0.5 millimeter in size. None of these drill bits will fit inside of the jet that came in this carburetor, so that tells me this is way smaller than it should be. This is probably about a 50 for a jet size, which is nowhere near big enough for a 125cc engine. It might not seem like a lot going from 19 to 22 millimeters on the openings, but in the grand scheme of things, 3 millimeters is quite a bit for airflow when this engine is this small. I'm probably going to have difficulty opening it up right in the middle there, so that might end up being a little goofy, but I'm gonna open these up a lot more than they are. So it seems to be going pretty darn well. I've also kind of polished it out so that the air can move through it a little smoother. I do need to get a longer Dremel attachment so I can get all the way up in there, but it's starting to look a lot better. Both sides are at about 21 millimeters. All right, well, this is all actually fitting pretty darn nicely. The throttle cable actually works as well, is exactly as it's supposed to. Goes up, snaps right back down. They really aren't kidding when they tell you to double check that the engine has oil before you turn it over, because this thing has just the absolute tip of this has oil on it. So it's definitely low, a pretty good amount. I'm just gonna go ahead and change it. Barely any oil came out. The manufacturer says that this takes 900 milliliters, and that looks like maybe 200 milliliters. All this Chinese engine stuff is really just kind of funny to me. This spark plug was literally less than finger tight. Let's see if we're getting spark now. Yep, we're getting spark. Well, that took way longer than expected for this JB Weld to dry, but it's finally, I think, dry enough for me to put fuel in it. I don't know what happened, but this is like 2 or 3 days later, and it's just now drying, so that's pretty incredible. I did bring it in my house, so it would be a little warmer, but still really slow drying. Maybe the tube is old that I bought on the shelves. I'm going to go ahead and fill it up with fuel and test to see if it runs before I put all the plastics back on, because I have a feeling that the jets and everything inside of the carburetor might not be quite right, but we'll see. Well, let's check if this thing's gonna turn on. A lot of that raw fuel that I just spilled everywhere evaporated already, so I'm gonna go ahead and give this thing a shot. Woohoo! That was way easier than I thought it was gonna be. Wow. That thing idles phenomenally. Oh, there goes, guys, but wow, that went way easier than I thought it would. Just like that, she's back and all together, besides the side panels, just in case I have to take something off after the test run. This is like the longest shifter travel I've ever seen. It's probably like 4 or 5 inches of travel to get it to actually shift. I had also moved the key so it's a little further up here. I don't know why it was over here to start with. It was over here right where a knee would be, so I took it, put it, and moved it forward quite a few inches, and that's a lot better. And now for the most important part. definitely hauls some ass now. First gear is useless. Sounds like to me it's not getting enough fuel, but maybe it is, I don't know. Well guys, this thing is an absolute blast. I didn't think that this would be so much fun, but I am just having an absolute riot with this mini quad. Hopefully you guys are enjoying me messing with this thing. It still needs a little bit of carburetor tuning. I don't know what's going on. It just kind of slugs off in the top end. So I figured now would be a good time to tell you how much I actually spent on this quad. For the engine alone, that's a 125cc China motor I got on sale for $125. And the reason I went with the 125 is because the next step up was like twice the amount of money, and I didn't want to be in this quad for very much, so I just went with a bigger engine. It makes about 8 horsepower, whereas the original 90cc engine made about 3.5 to 4. This feels like way more horsepower. Carburetor I put on here was $25. I drilled out the main jet. I probably shouldn't have because it looks like it might be getting too much fuel. A new CDI box and little kit that I bought, that was $25. Oil and spark plugs. Oil was $11, spark plugs were $8. I ordered 2 spark plugs just in case. The grand total for everything in this, not including the quad itself, that was $50. But $194 I'm into this quad now. I'm gonna leave the video here. I am extremely excited to have this thing running. I'm gonna get it a little more finely tuned, but that'll be at a later date. So if you guys liked the video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and I will see you in the next one.